Dear Princess Celestia, I wanted to share my thoughts with you. Ahem. I didn't learn anything. I was right all along.
Even after 10 years, that line still bothers me. Apparently, I'm the only one of the fandom who thinks this is negatively impactful. Am I looking too deep into this line? Am I overthinking it? No, not really. A child could get a bad impression out of this. For reasons explained, we need to address the show's moral compass. For the longest time, there was a certain line in the show that got me so worked up that it kind of became a meme over how I critiqued the series. And it was this line when I reviewed the Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000.
I didn't learn anything. I was right all along.
Similarly, there's a line that Trixie said in All Bottled Up.
Haven't you learned anything about using magic to solve your problems?
No. If we learn that lesson, how will we ever have fun?
Both of these lines have shared one common issue: not learning anything and said in an arrogant manner. Which, when you think about it, that's very toxic to send to children, especially when you make a show about moral lessons. So I felt the need to address the matters more thoroughly and talk about our moral compass in the social media. That being said, why do I take the messages in Friendship is Magic so seriously? The simple answer is because the show does it, or it first started doing that. During Season 1, Twilight wrote letters to Celestia explaining her lesson of whatever she's experienced. It later opened up to other characters in Season 2, providing what lessons they've learned. This was a lot like previous shows from earlier decades, like G.I. Joe and Captain Planet, particularly when the characters spoke directly to the audience. However, what worked better here was that Twilight and her friends explained what they learned, and the audience was there for the ride instead of just being spoken down to. There's more of a genius behind that, but I'll have to put a pin on it for now. Taking this into account, when it comes to making a series that involve moral lessons to give viewers, they also have to be done delicately. There were multiple cases where the bad messages, or badly executed ones, were a huge reason some of the episodes were hated. The Mysterious Mare Duel meant to teach a lesson about having a massive ego, but it was executed in the worst way possible by not being upfront with Dash about her behavior first, before playing the act and bringing her down. Some putting to watch over me utterly demoralized the lesson about earning her siblings' trust and independence by having Apple Bloom risk her life over a pie delivery. And Parental Guidance taught the worst lesson possible about the importance of parenthood by gaslighting Dash, where she rightfully scolded them for being so overbearing, thereby neglecting to teach them about overstepping their boundaries, which was honestly a more important lesson. As you can tell, whatever message is trying to be conveyed plays a huge role in the writing. Even in this series, some redemption arcs were played out so sloppily with several antagonistic roles. Everyone's already pointed that out for a while, so I don't need to reiterate. Now, does that mean that a good episode only requires a good message? Oh, fuck no. There were episodes that had great messages, but have sabotaged any good writing. Spike at Your Service is a huge example of that. It had a solid message about repaying a service, but it came at the cost of the writing quality. While I do have arguments about Spike's characterization, the Dragon Code was contrived as hell, some of the humor was questionable, and the dialogue didn't have the best lines.
I just can't cotton with you permanently serving me.
A Friend Indeed taught the viewers about the importance of personal space as demonstrated by Cranky Doodle, but it was done out of the repetition of Pinkie Pie overstepping boundaries, invading his personal space, touching his stuff, and asking him questions that are none of her business, therefore deteriorating the enjoyment of the episode massively. Applejack's Day Off provided a lot of commentary over developing negative habits, but by doing so, it dragged some scenes out and repeated their moments to get its point across, only to make the viewer feel patronized. Not a good way to entertain your viewers. Now, knowing the pros and cons, it is imperative to keep a balance between good writing and provide a good lesson if you're going to bring morals into your story. This is sometimes referred to as a theme, a narrative topic that the story and the characters are centered around to help narrow down the message. But even then, there doesn't have to be a message. It can make for a great conversation through its storytelling, and that can be said for any media. Batman Begins revolving around fear, the Lego movies centering around artistic freedom, or The Shawshank Redemption, encouraging hope for escapism. And I just now realized that all these titles are Warner Brothers properties. Please don't sue me, I was just trying to make a point. In general, I do not want to be the one responsible for causing a bad influence, especially when it comes to being presented to children. That includes recommending or giving praise to an episode that could be morally harmful. So when I hear something like Applejack saying, "I didn't learn anything, I was right all along," I can sense how problematic that can be when you consider the following. Kids quote what they watch.
It defines who I am.
We're not saying you have... What?
Someone on TV said it.
Someone on TV said it. Now imagine if someone like Dash from The Incredibles, who besides his powers represents an average child, would say something like what Applejack said in a classroom. "I didn't learn anything. I was right all along." Blasphemer! Yeah, that would get him into a lot of trouble. Obviously, the real message in the episode was referring to taking your time on producing better quality, but because of how exaggerated and humorous that first line is, kids are just gonna laugh over that line and miss the real message that is explained directly afterwards. Same thing with All Bottled Up, but verbally switched around. The obvious message is already stated by the title. Don't bottle in your emotions. Find a healthy way to let it out and be honest with your friends if they're taking you for granted. But by saying, "How will we ever have fun if you learn the restrictions of the use of your magic" at the end of the episode, that gives children the implication of solving problems the laziest, if not most dangerous way possible. Again, there's more for me to say as I put a pin on what I mentioned earlier. Now, I am aware that some of you would argue that no one should rely on something like a TV show to learn moral lessons, and you'd be correct. Media isn't your teacher. But the sad truth is, a lot of us still do. In fact, it's been around for decades. Tom and Jerry had some controversy surrounding the cartoon violence and potential ideas that they would plant into children. Even more so in the later decades with spaghetti westerns, we had violent gunfire going on. This would later be reduced to lasers in Saturday morning cartoons whenever they're showed to children. Jackass, which was an adult program, had a disclaimer because some people, even adults, tried to imitate the dangerous stunts that they watched. Now, that's not the same thing as provided a bad message. Kids adapt to learning to separate fiction from reality. But even so, one truth still remains. Kids are very impressionable. And especially in our today's society where social media has taken over our culture, parents need to be more aware of what their kids are watching. Let me be clear about something else. I'm not demonizing anyone behind production. DHX has been very responsive and respectful to anyone who enjoyed and supported Friendship is Magic. As a matter of fact, from what I've heard, and I'm taking this with a pinch of salt here, there was no friendship report originally planned in the writing process of Super Speedy. This would become more apparent in the later seasons. However, M.A. Larson, the one behind the episode, wrote that infamous line as a joke and would come back to finalize the script later. However, that line was approved by the staff, and Larson was incredibly surprised to see it be greenlit. So in their eyes, they thought it was just hilarious and was just having fun with whatever it was they were working on. When picturing their perspective on writing any episode, they have thought what they wrote was the best script possible, before the episode would air and flaws would be called out. That's a frustrating cycle anyone can relate to. But that's a whole different topic I'll have to save for another time because that'll derail the current subject here. With that said, some have also argued saying that Applejack's line was ideally breaking the formula, providing messages to encourage kids to start thinking for themselves rather than be spoon-fed. And while that is a very healthy way to think about, there's a huge difference between altering the formula and giving it the finger. This is where I unpinned what I was saving for from earlier regarding the genius behind the show's execution in bringing messages. The friendship reports began to become scarce over seasons 3 and 4, and eventually they were no longer narrated. Rather, the messages were demonstrated as a part of the events for the viewers to piece together. This was respecting the audience's intelligence to identify what there was to learn compared to having a friendship report, provide a sense of growth to those who watched the series from the beginning, and have a potentially healthy discussion for newcomers if they missed anything. Along with that, there was something small but a genius workaround where the magic was being used in the episodes. Based on Swarm of the Century, Winter Wrap-Up, and Return of Harmony, Twilight tried to resolve problems with the use of her magic, only for it to backfire. And that was a clever way to demonstrate how you can't magically solve things. You have to be proactive, something Trixie neglects to acknowledge. Obviously, all of this was better to be taken with a pinch of salt, but it's certainly a better way of changing the formula than having someone say, "I didn't learn jack shit, so fuck you, Celestia." So with a lot of insight provided here, I do hope you understand my position on why I have taken the messages from the show seriously. Not because they were teaching me anything, rather because I care about how lessons are to be demonstrated, but not just kids, but adults too who have taken lessons from the show or movies at heart. Or at least when they were given something to think about. Inherently, there is a fun factor in taking any messages, especially for a discussion, depending on what you watch. But it's also important to know your sense of awareness of what's said in the general media. Which is why I say, even in this video, take whatever you watch with a grain of salt. More importantly, parents do need to be aware of what their kids are watching on a case-by-case basis. And if there's a potential issue that could cause a bad influence, don't hesitate to sit them down and talk to them. Interacting with them is more important than general media anyway. You are the parent, not the show. And to anyone who writes something for moral lessons, take my advice and never, ever, ever, ever write the words "not learning anything." That's a huge red flag ready to spring out. So until next time, this is GoldenFox, and take care.